I'm Sarah Rowden, and I live in Clinton County, been here for many years. I am the chairman of the Clinton County Democratic Committee, and therefore have had the opportunity to meet all of you, and I think this might be my 5th forum that I have sat through. So, but I do have a question, and this is a very practical question, all right? You're going to go through a primary, and for each one of you, there's 2 possible outcomes. You're going to win, or you're going to lose. My question is, if you win the primary, how are you going to unify the party? Because people are supporting all of you. There are different people. How are you going to unify the party? The second question, second part to that, is if you lose, how are you going to personally support the winner?
Mr. Nelson, we begin with you.
So June 27th is going to be a big day for all of us when we get to take 5 disparate campaigns and pull them together behind who you all select to be your nominee. If I am so honored to be that nominee, I'll be reaching out to my fellow candidates here, and I'll be looking to put together meetings with them and their core volunteer teams. And I will show up and first and foremost listen. I will understand what it is they found faults in our campaign, where the deficits are, and I will make sure that everybody knows that they have a home inside our campaign, because only if we stand together do we have a chance to win. If y'all select somebody else to be your nominee, I'm going to take my leadership from the person that you have selected to be your leader. I'll make myself available. I'll make my understanding available. I will be there to support the campaign in whatever capacity that campaign and myself sees fit. Certainly be there to endorse, and from that point on, I'll take my lead from that campaign. And Sarah, thank you for your service to the Democratic Party here in Clinton County. It's the folks like you that make this change all possible.
Mr. Redigan?
Well, first of all, participating in this process gives you an incredible appreciation and hope for the country. The reality is, on this stage right now, you have 5 very well qualified choices to represent this party and this district in this congressional race. And so ultimately the decision, I think, will come down to things like where you believe we are in the world's history right now, and what type of a person or what type of an individual you believe is the right person for this moment at this time. That decision is not a decision to reject any of the other people. It is to suggest that those other people may not be the right person for this moment at this time. If in fact I am chosen to be that person at this time, if they believe that I am the person in that context, I will reach out to the people around me who I've learned and come to have great respect for, whether it's their enthusiasm, intelligence, brilliance. I mean, there's so much information that's on this table. And if I have the reality of losing and someone else is the person for this time, I will put myself at their disposal.
Ms. Wilson?
Well, what I'm very encouraged by is the way that at least most of us have already become very close and been working together, and you know, it's pretty friendly. And you know, definitely there are times and campaigns that are not acting that way, but I think at the end of the day, it's less about the candidate and the campaign staff, and more about the feeling of unity across the district. It's the volunteers and supporters. I mean, I haven't met a person who supports another. I've met very few people who support other campaigns who don't feel as though they want to support anyone else should they be elected. I mean, it's just not the feeling on the ground. And so, you know, personally, I'm willing to do it and be available in whatever capacity the nominee would like. Obviously, I'm planning on being that person and need help from every single person in this district, whether you're involved in a campaign or not, to be successful in November. But I really don't think this is as big an issue as many people are worried about it being.
Ms. Cobb?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple opportunities here. First and foremost, I think the chairs have an opportunity to lead. I think the chairs have let the communities lead, and it was the right thing to do, but I think after this election, it's an opportunity for the chairs to lead and say, okay, how will we get together? And I think as the winner, I think it's asking each of the people at the table here, including Sarah Eidelman, including David Mastriani, what are the gifts and the talents that they bring, and how would they, each of the people here, like to contribute, and the people on their team. As of tonight, we have 850 volunteers, all doing lots of different things, because different people have different talents. And so I'm assuming on every other campaign, that's the same. And so it's becoming a larger team. We are seeing mobilization like we have never seen. The Democrats got over 12,000 votes between us. That is amazing. And so we are unified, we are strong, and we will continue to be so into November and beyond.
Ms. Martz.
As your question suggests, this is a moment in our nation when this is about more than us as individual candidates, more than our campaigns. And now is the time that we must come together as a party to stand for something. Before I was a candidate, I was unifying the progressive groups around the district. And we must come together again to unify around the Democratic nominee if we want to win in November. I plan to host a unity event on election night to bring all of the volunteers and the supporters of all of the campaigns together with Democrats so that we can declare in one voice, we are strong, we are united, and we will win. And after the primary is over, as the Democratic nominee, I would organize a summit to bring us all together again, volunteers, supporters, Democratic parties, so that we can decide how we want to move forward. If I am not so lucky, I will absolutely participate in that and play my role. We have no choice. I know it's hard, but we can unite, we must. That is how we win.
Thank you. 30-second rebuttal, Ms. Cobb.
Emily, I thank you. You have brought up the unity event, and I think it's a great idea, but I want you to know that I won't be there. And I'll be with my volunteers in the field till 9 o'clock at night. Anywhere I go from where I live here, which is a neutral community, is 2.5 hours. I'm going to be working till 9 o'clock at night. When I ran before, I worked till 9 o'clock at night. We had poll runners, we were calling people, and I'm going to be doing that. And that's not to diminish the idea of a unity event, but I want you to know that it won't be on election night. And I look forward to it when it happens.
And Ms. Martz.
This is an event that is open to all. And at the event, all candidates will be honored, along with our volunteers and our supporters. And I know that it is hard. And that is exactly why it has value. We will be a model for unifying Democrats across the nation. This moment, in this district, in this time, with this level of engagement, doesn't come around very often. And we cannot afford to let anything stand in our way of victory. And I hope everyone here watching comes to one of the events.
My name is Eileen Raymond, and I live in Canton. It's a long way from here. As the evening has gone on, I've been perpetually kind of confused, because it sounds to me like your conception of the role of a congressperson is to fix everything from the smallest dog catcher thing in a community to nuclear war. So my question for you is, as one congressperson and as one of the newest congresspeople in the 435 of them, can you identify a specific focus that you would like to attack, and why you think you can be useful in solving that problem in your role as one congressperson and a new kid on the block?
All right, Mr. Radigan, we start with you.
So because of my personal history with the sitting members of our government, which goes back over a decade, and because I'm already a known person to them, in fact, some of our campaign donors have joked that they're giving us money because they know that I'm the only person that they don't want to have come there. because I'm so well known in that town for confronting them. And so because I have the prior recognition in the community, it gives me a disproportionate relative influence. And if there's one thing that I will push for, it is a seat on the Finance Committee and the advancement of an infrastructure bank for investment in upstate New York and the use of antitrust law to break up the monopolies that have the stranglehold on our government, while simultaneously using the convening power of being a representative to put together a district dashboard that sets a set of mutual goals that I alone cannot fix, but that we as a collective can fix. And I believe that a micro focus on a district dashboard of what our goals are, along with reform and antitrust and a loud and strong voice, is a unique opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I really appreciate this question because we do have a bit of a savior complex, and you know, with ego for days, it's easy to say, I'm going to show up and fix all your problems. I'm famous, I'm effective, I'm loud, or I'm, you know, whatever the adjective might be. However, the reality is that as a freshman congressperson, you don't have a lot of power. It doesn't really matter who you know. I mean, those relationships certainly come into play, but many of us on the stage have relationships in DC, and that's probably why we're drawn to this in the first place. What you can do, no matter who you are, is drive the conversation and be an effective negotiator on behalf of your constituents, and be willing to stand up to business as usual. Be willing to not roll over and stick to D-trip talking points and, you know, be a good little Democrat or a good little Congresswoman. And that is exactly why I'm running right now. We are in a very unique political moment, and there is an opportunity to shift the conversation, and that's my objective.
Ms. Cobb.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're missing first and foremost is a congressperson who's present in the district. We have talked about solving problems. We've talked about health care and the environment. What we are missing is a person who really cares about constituents. The power of being able to call a congressperson and say, I have an immigration problem, can you help me? I'm a veteran, I'm filling out this form, can you help me? And that, to me, was work that I got to do on a very small scale as a legislator, but I see other congresspeople doing for their constituents, and I see what's missing in this district. So yes, I think that the skills that I have to get people to collaborate together and work together, I hope to bring, and that's part of constituent services. It's unifying this district. As I've gone around, people say it's so big. Well, it is big, but we are alike. We struggle with the same things, and having a congressperson who's advocating for all of us in Washington and communicating with all of us is really what we're missing, and as a freshman, makes no difference. The new person on the block can do that.
Ms. Martz.
I will be effective in Congress the same way that I've been effective here in the North Country, creating jobs, helping the solar industry expand, finding new markets for farmers, and that is by creating relationships and partnerships. In Congress, I will immediately start looking to build the relationships and build the partnerships with other members of Congress in rural areas, in areas that have the same concerns that we have here in the North Country. And I will also choose my committees wisely, because that is where agendas are set, are in the committee. And so one of the committees I'd like to serve on is the Education and Workforce Development Committee. And that is specifically to make sure that we have a strong voice coming out of the North Country that is dependent upon public schools, that is fighting against Betsy DeVos, whom Elise Stefanik is complicit with in her plan to cut billions of dollars from the Department of Education. If that happens, our public schools will suffer, and we need a voice in Congress setting the agenda, working in partnerships to keep that from happening.
And Mr. Nelson.
So what we here in the 21st Congressional District have the ability to control is 1/435th of the problem of the House of Representatives. No matter what you do with 1/435th, you are not going to solve all of the problems. But that does not absolve us of the responsibility to do the best we can with our 1/435th. But it is on the rest of the country to do their part as well, so that we can work together and get things done. That's why we haven't waited to begin building relationships. As a candidate running as a Justice Democrat, running with campaigns across the country, and part of our plan is to build a caucus in the 116th Congress where we can work together. working with Randy Bryce, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congressman Roca Hanna, Congressman Raul Gifalga, and others to advance the agenda and to have a concentrated seat of power to actually get things done. And looking for opportunities that you might not think about. We can work with the Freedom Caucus on national security, and we can work with them on dealing with domestic surveillance of American citizens through warrantless spying. So there are areas of agreement where we can get things done.
I'm Leonard Moore. I'm from Plattsburgh, and I am particularly concerned about the issue of voting rights over the last couple of decades in the United States. And I think we've seen it hurt our democracy in countless ways over the last 20 years, particularly over the last 10 years. The Voting Rights Act was gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013. There was a major decision giving more powers to the state to move people off the voting rolls by the Supreme Court yesterday. And what I would like to know is if you have the opportunity as a representative in Congress to address the issue of voting rights and everything that's happened to voting rights over the last 20 years, what would you do? What would you support? Would you support a new Voting Rights Act? If you did, what would it look like? Would you support a constitutional amendment to protect voting rights in a more fundamental way than they've been protected in the past? Arguably, voter suppression made a huge difference in the election of 2016. So I'd like to know where you stand on that issue.
Ms. Wilson, we begin with you.
Yeah, I believe an informed and active electorate is perhaps the most important thing to a democracy. Certainly, same-day registration, instant registration. There's actually a member of our team, it's on the ballot in Nevada, and these are the kinds of things that affect everyone. That it's like campaign finance reform. It's something that underpins so many of these larger issues we're talking about, and yet it's not a bread and butter issue. It doesn't come up that often in a rural district, certainly in a general election. But Colorado is doing something really interesting. They rolled it out, I believe, just this year, maybe a couple of years ago. But they are mailing everyone a ballot, so every registered voter gets a ballot. And if you're an independent, you get to choose whether you want to vote for a Democrat or a Republican. And the argument is that, oh, well, there's too many false votes. But they've actually looked at the data. So this must be at least the second or third year. And they've looked at the data, and it's happened a handful of times where someone mailed in their mother's card. So I think that there are innovative ways to address this issue, and it's certainly something that I would commit to looking at very closely and fighting for in Congress.
Thank you. Ms. Cobb.
Yeah, this is why elections matter. Precisely this. We are at I said in the beginning, we are at a crossroads. Our rights are being chipped away at, and we have to stand up to that. When I was a legislator, we implemented the Help America Vote Act, which now our election system, we have ballots that are electronic, but now we know that there are some cybersecurity issues. So I'm going to expand what you've said. It's about access to the polls. It's about cybersecurity and not making sure that our rolls are not purged from someone else. And it's about making sure that the states are not suppressing the vote. Sometimes states have rights. Sometimes the federal government is the arbiter of securing our freedoms and our equality. And in this case, it's the federal government. The federal government must lead and ensure that every person has a right to vote. And the states cannot be left to their own devices in terms of this because of the risk that we are facing right now.
Thank you. Ms. Martz.
I would support any legislation at the congressional level that would create federal standards for ensuring that everyone has access to voting, because this is bringing up the fact that the lack of people's voices are being heard, and that's why I'm running for Congress, to listen to your stories. When I was down in Argyle, there's a young mother whose son has a disability that restricts his capacity to speak. And there is technology out there that would allow him to communicate, but because of the lack of broadband in our district, he is unable to speak with his family in his own home. And these stories are falling on deaf ears. in Washington, and I have been traveling around the district over 40,000 miles, listening to you to bring our stories to Washington. Whether it's the family who did have to choose between health care or financial bankruptcy, or the teacher who sends her kids home with food to make sure that they have a meal. These are the stories that matter to me. These are the voices I will bring to Washington, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on June 26th.
Mr. Nelson.
So one of the things I find interesting about the Voting Rights Act is that it singled out specific states for heightened scrutiny on their voting laws. And that's the part that the Supreme Court tossed out. But one of the states that was left off is the state that has perhaps the worst election laws in the entire country, and that's New York State. We don't have early voting. We have long voter registration deadlines. We don't have vote by mail. And if you wanted to become a Democrat to vote in this primary, you had to register by October 13th of 2017. So we need to do a lot to stop voter suppression here in the state of New York. The Democratic Party has the ability to qualify independent voters, non-affiliated voters, to vote in our primary. A resolution was introduced in the State Democratic Committee and it was tabled without debate, and the Democratic Party in the state of New York should not be complicit in voter suppression in the state of New York. We need to reform our entire electoral system so that people have an access to vote. We also need to reform the voting system to get rid of the spoiler effect so that Greens and Democrats stop fighting with each other and can work together to fight Republicans who are destroying things that we both believe in.
And Mr. Radigan.
What you mentioned is one of a myriad of issues that it's the very foundation of my campaign. The reason I'm running for Congress is because we have a broken political system that can be fixed and must be fixed. As I mentioned, we are at a moment in time where not addressing this provides a tremendous amount of risk to the well-being of ourselves, our families, our children. Restricting the vote is just one in a myriad of issues. The very way we gerrymander our districts to ensure that 90% of the time, no matter what the voting rights are, the person keeps their job, even with a 10% approval rating. They use the gerrymander and the suppressed vote to then take the money of the weapons companies, the pharmaceuticals companies, the banks, and make policies at our expense. So yes, the voting right issue must be dealt with, but it is part of a portfolio of political reform that must happen, needs to happen right now in order to not only correct the course, but to realign our government to actually represent the people of this country as opposed to allow it to be as detached as it is through the voting rights issues, the gerrymandering issues, and all the other issues that empower them to abuse us at the monopolies that control our government right now.
Ms. Cobb, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, it's not really a rebuttal, but it's really a call to action, and that is we have a vote coming up. So for everyone who are Democrats, please get out and vote. You see our lawn signs everywhere. Please vote, and vote in November. The reality is lots of people have to overcome many barriers to vote, but we don't in this country. I mean, we're not hopefully going to be shot like many other countries. So our excuse is small compared to so many people in the world. So I just implore people, please vote.
Ms. Martz.
There are 2 weeks left to Election Day, and I'm sure you can identify 5 of your friends who have yet to be engaged in this process. And I ask you to think about those tonight and to make it a goal of yours that between now and June 26th, that you figure out what matters to them, you convince them that if they don't vote on June 26th, they are doing themselves and their children and their families a grave disservice, and you offer them a ride to the polling place.